Boston unveils a Martin Luther King statue that is very suggestive to see the very, very, very least about it. And when you go to the other angle, it's not any better. So we'll talk just a bit about that, what it was supposed to be, and how it was done in execution. So there is going to be that. In other news, the U.S. is set to hit the debt limit on Thursday. Now, this does not mean, and by the way, I'm way over yelling over this, and this does not mean that we will run out of money or that we'll have to shut down the government or that we will default on the debt, but it does mean that some spending practices will have to be done, and a local KTLA5 news station does come out and tell us just a little bit about how this really isn't that big of a deal. So we'll go over some of that and some of the reactions from both sides to this and where this goes. Another killing by police of a, quote, unarmed black man in Los Angeles. It brings forth some emotions, not nearly as much as we would see if this was an election year with a Republican in office, but we'll talk just a bit about that, where this is going, and what happens with that. And Missouri tightens its women's dress code, requiring the covering of arms, and the left on Twitter loses their crap. It is going to be all this and more. I got more votes than Kevin McCarthy. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Are we ever going to get to Xanarkand? We don't know. We'll have to come back and see that. But welcome to Contemporary. My name is Jay Edgar. We have got a ton to go over. I've been trying to catch myself. I've been listening back to myself just a little bit more. And a couple things that I do need to point out and watch for myself is not to turn away from the microphone to look and see what's going on the monitors or what's going on off that until I finish speaking. I caught that. I've been listening a little bit more to myself. And the other thing is not to project quite as much into this microphone now. I do hope to be getting a newer microphone in the future here so we can take some of this back up and make this a little bit more of a natural thing here. But yeah, I do have to temper myself a little bit while we're talking. But what I will not temper myself with is my opinions and the truth on what's actually out there. So we'll be talking a lot about the statue, about Dr. King. We'll talk about the debt ceiling. I think that's going to be the brunt of the show, is talking about the debt ceiling. And there is some stuff here that I am going to be skipping over as we go, because we, again, have a ton of articles here. We've got some stuff on DocumentGate. We've got some stuff on the murder or death, depending on how you look at it, of Keenan Anderson over in Los Angeles, and why I don't think that this is going to go anywhere or become a major news story. But we've got all this and more over on Contemporary. Before we get started, make sure you guys go check out great programming, such as The Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, The R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys. Go check out Tweets by Brit, Mr. Behavior, The No Gimmicks Podcast, and all the rest over there as we come together to try to bring you a better news site that is by the common man for the common man. So go check out all that great programming, and let's get down to business on the news before we get started. Well, no, we're not going to before we get started. We are getting started, and let's have a look. Starting today with the Dow, which is closed today, so we are looking at the same numbers we looked at on Friday, still holding at 34,302.61 with a 112.64 point gain on Friday, but it's looking like the futures are turning down off of that, so not much to see here as we go into the trading starting at 9 a.m. tomorrow. Bitcoin, however, has been all over the place this weekend. Now, Bitcoin right now is trading out at 21,198.80. after just breaking 20,000 when last we checked it out on Friday. So we've had a very good run off of this, and I mean, you can sit back and see where it just came back up and spiked late in the week last week. It tumbled a little bit, then rose and tumbled a little bit more, but still coming into a very positive point. So if you did take some time and buy the Bitcoin while it's on sale, I'm not saying that you're rich, but you're probably looking a little bit better than you were before. So congratulations off of that. Looking in at your gas prices, excuse me, around the Madison area, even though I don't live in that area anymore. 315, looks like we've seen a rise in gas prices somewhere on the east side. On the west side, not so much. Over on the east side, 315, 310, coming out of this, 303 still leaving town on the southeast side of the BP. That's holding steady with 306 and on the isthmus, but the 310 going into the isthmus is now at 315, so a little bit of stuff going up there. But over to the west side, we're holding steady. 308 on the quick trip on the southwest side. On the straight west side, it's still at 295. The speedway is up to 320, being the high price leader in the Madison area. Now, of course, it's 329 where I live because, well, it is. So that's what we see coming off of that. Let's grab one from IBD. We only have one finance article today because we have got so much other news to go on to, especially with the debt ceiling. From Investors Business Daily, Dow futures fall after market holiday. Tesla's big transition, from Ed Carson. Dow futures fell slightly Monday evening, along with the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq. The stock market rally picked up steam in the past week with strong gains clearing key levels. The S&P briefly faced resistance at the 200-day line, but moved above that key level on Friday. A large number of leading stocks flashed buy points. Investors can be adding exposure gradually as the market rally improves, while many top stocks are now extended. Wendy's, Exxon, Quanta Services, Celsius Holdings, Insulet are all actionable from early entries. Wendy's and Quanta Services have flat new bases, joining ExxonMobil stocks and Insulet. Celsius Holdings needs another week to forge a proper base. Celsius Holdings is on the... Wow, we got almost through the article and then it came up with this? What the fuck? Sorry, what the crap? I hope my niece and nephew weren't, nieces rather than nephew weren't listening when I said that. Celsius is on Swing Trader and the IBD 50. Celsius, Insulet, and Wendy's were the most recent 3 IBD stock of the day selections. Meanwhile, Tesla on Friday announced a big price cut in the US and Europe, a week after slashing prices in China and key Asian markets. Tesla closed modestly lower, but rebounded solidly for the week. But the EV giant faces a painful transition as investors increasingly view Tesla as an automaker, not a tech company. But it is an automaker. I mean, yeah, I understand that some of the tech is cool, but it's literally a car company. On the futures, Dow futures edged lower versus fair value. The S&P fell 0.1 and the Nasdaq futures fell 0.2. U.S. stock markets were closed on Monday for Martin Luther King Jr. holiday, but other exchanges around the world were open. Crude oil futures fell more than 1%. Natural gas prices popped 7%. That's going to be tough when heating season comes around. Copper futures sank nearly 2%. And remember, overnight action in Dow futures and elsewhere doesn't necessarily translate into actual trading in the next regular stock market session. So, that's what we have for that. But before we do anything else, we've got to go talk and support the holiday, because it is a national holiday that we have to support for some reason or another. And of course, it gets commemorated with a statue, this coming from over the weekend. From NBC, Boston unveils a new sculpture honoring Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King. From Claretta Bellamy. Just a few years ago, conceptual artist Hank Willis Thomas had no idea he'd be instrumental in commemorating the lives of Martin Luther King Jr. and Coretta Scott King. But when his application was selected out of 125 artists and architects to design a new monument in Boston dedicated to the civil rights icons, he was shocked. When I submitted the proposal, I didn't even think that we really had a chance. Thomas, 46, told NBC News. By the time it was approved, I guess I've just been on autopilot, like, okay, how do I just, I don't know, not get in the way of history? It really has been my mission over the past several years. And even that's not a good angle, dude. I'm sorry. That's not a good angle either. I will give NBC the benefit of the doubt that they searched to find the best angle for this. We're going to be looking at this from two other angles. But even that looks... I can't. Aiming to both inspire visitors and honor the King's legacy, Thomas' work will be revealed on Friday in Boston Common, America's oldest city park in downtown Boston. The bronze structure, which is 20 feet long, 26 feet wide, entitled The Embrace, depicts the arms and shoulders and hands of the kings hugging after Martin received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964, the moment immortalized in a famous photo. Those scheduled to attend the ceremony will include the king's son, Martin Luther King III, also a civil rights activist, and his 14-year-old daughter, Yolanda Renee King, who gave a speech on racial equality at the Lincoln Memorial in 2020. So that is the statue in theory. In practice, yeah, in practice we get this. What does that look like to you? I realize I am tainted by a lifetime of promiscuity, but come on. Seriously. Come on. That's like, I have a dream. Like, come on, seriously. You've got a thigh and another thigh wrapped around the head with one arm on the thigh. What? What am I supposed to take away from this? I can't. I can't. Can anybody see something different in this photo? And that's not even the worst angle. Because we also have that. Don't worry, when my hormones started up, I had a dream too, and it was that I would turn out looking like that. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I gotta say that, I mean, modern art is terrible to begin with. But, come on. Mock it out in clay before you make the gigantic bronze statue and look at it from every angle. Seriously. Especially that one. Come on. I got one here from CNN. A new monument dedicated to Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King prompts mockery and criticism. From Justin Gamble and Nicole Chavez. Backlash ensued soon after a monument meant to honor Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his wife Coretta Scott King's legacy in Boston was unveiled. The 20-foot tall, 40-foot wide, The Embrace statue was unveiled Friday on Boston Common, where King gave a speech on April 23, 1965 to a crowd of 22,000. The statue was inspired by a photograph of King and Scott King, which captured them hugging after he won the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. The art piece, designed by Brooklyn-based conceptual artist Hank Willis Thomas, only features the couple's arms during the embrace, and not their heads. Are you sure about that? Because that kind of looks like a head. Which has sparked criticism and mockery online. Some people described it as hideous or disrespectful, while others posted memes and said it resembles a sex act. Yeah, it does. Seneca Scott, a community organizer in Oakland and cousin of Scott King, told CNN the statue was insulting to his family. He previously described it as a masturbatory mental homage in an essay published by Compact magazine. If you look at it from all angles, and it's probably two people hugging each other, it's four hands, it's not the missing heads, it's not the atrocity that other people clamp onto that. It's a stump that looked like a penis. That's the joke, Scott told CNN. But Martin Luther King III on Monday said he was grateful to be able to see a statue representing his parents' love story and their partnership. While some people have negative opinions about the monument, he told CNN's Don Lemon on Monday he liked it. I think that's a huge representation of bringing people together, King said. I think the artist did a great job. I'm satisfied, yeah. It didn't have my mom and dad's images, but it represents something that brings people together. I mean, I think it's so groovy now that people are finally getting together. And in this time, day and age, where there's so much division, we need symbols about that talk, about bringing us together, he added. CNN has reached out to Thomas for comment about the reaction to the embrace in his newsletter. Thomas said earlier this month the piece was not only a monument to King and Scott King, but a monument to love and the power that it holds. Look, I appreciate the message that Martin Luther King Jr. put out. I can tell you that right off the bat. I understand the message, and I appreciate the message, and I appreciate any race or people from any culture coming out to try to use that message to better the world. I get that. I understand it. I appreciate what Dr. King did. But with that being said, guys, this ain't it. Let's grab one from the New York Post. Woke $10 million MLK penis statue insults black community. Coretta Scott King kin. Yeah, we had talked about this, I think. Yeah. Oh, no, we've got more. The mainstream media was reporting on it like it was all beautiful because they were told that they had to say that. Seneca Scott, Coretta's cousin, told the Post by phone on Sunday, referring to a new artwork on the Boston Common. But then when it came out, a little boy pointed out, "That's a penis!" And everyone was like, "Yo, that's a big old dong, man," said the 43-year-old Oakland, California resident. If you had showed that statue to anyone in the hood, they'd have been like, "No, absolutely not." He wrote scornfully on Compact magazine, $10 million were wasted to create a masturbatory metal homage to my legendary family members, one of the all-time greatest American families. So yeah, there's that. But the gaffes weren't finished. Joe Biden, being Joe Biden, had to make a fool out of himself over Martin Luther King twice, although the second one it's ambiguous if it had anything to do with King in actuality, but it's still him making a fool out of himself. From the Daily Wire. Watch, Biden forgets the name of MLK's daughter-in-law while singing happy birthday to her. Coming to you from Daily Wire News. President Joe Biden appeared to forget the name of Martin Luther King Jr.'s daughter-in-law while singing happy birthday to her on Monday while speaking at a left-wing event. You could have left those two words out. Whoever wrote this. See, this right here is the reason that all the leftoids call you all racist. And biased. Which, I understand the Daily Wire is biased, but you could have left these two words out and kept the same messaging. The incident happened as the 80-year-old president addressed the National Action Network, which is run by Al Sharpton, Martin Luther King III, and his wife. Martin III, we celebrate a legacy of your beloved father and mother. They worked for the beloved community. But congratulations today to the honorees, including your wife, who I understand it's her birthday today, Biden said of 49-year-old Andrea Waters King. Let's watch.
Well, look, my wife has a rule in her family. When somebody's birthday, you sing happy birthday. You ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Valen. Happy birthday to you. Well,
81 million votes, folks. Yeah, I believe it too. Alright. And not to be outdone, Biden does another racist thing. Greg Price tweeting out, Biden, I used to go to 7:30 Mass every morning in high school and then college before I went to a black church. Not a joke. Which is not a thing that he ever actually did. He stayed devoutly Catholic. Let's listen.
And let's say one thing to rest. I may be a practicing Catholic. I used to go to 7:30 Mass every morning in high school and then in college before I went to the black church. Not a joke. Andy knows this. And let's say one thing to rest. I may be a practicing Catholic. I used to go to 7:30 Mass.
81 million votes. Oh, there's more. I didn't catch the second video. Also not a thing that he did.
I have two political heroes my entire life. When I started off as a 22-year-old kid in the East Side of the Civil Rights Movement. I have two political heroes my entire life. When I started off as a 22-year-old kid in the East Side of the Civil Rights Movement. I have two political heroes.
81 million votes, folks. 81 million right there. All right, that's all that I have on the statue and StatueGate and everything else that went along with that. I did have a little bit of fun with that, I'm not going to lie. Let's talk a bit about the debt ceiling, which is probably going to comprise the vast majority of the rest of the program. So we're going to start with CNBC making the announcement all the way back 3 days ago. The U.S. will hit its debt limit on Thursday. Start taking steps to avoid default, Yellen warns Congress. This is from Dan Mangan, Christina Wilkie, and Kayla Tausche. Janet Yellen on Friday notified Congress that the U.S. will reach its statutory debt limit next Thursday. After that, the Treasury Department this month will begin taking certain extraordinary measures to prevent the U.S. from defaulting on its obligations, Yellen wrote in a letter to the new House Speaker Kevin McCarthy of California. The Treasury is not currently able to estimate how long those emergency actions will allow the U.S. to pay for government obligations, she wrote. But it is unlikely that cash and extraordinary measures will be exhausted before early June, Yellen added. She warned McCarthy that it is critical that Congress act in a timely manner to increase or suspend the debt limit. Well, they say that every time. Failure to meet the government's obligations would cause irreparable harm to the U.S. economy, the livelihoods of all Americans, and global financial stability, Yellen wrote. Well, then you better start actually having the conversation about what to do about the excessive amount of debt, because I'm going to tell you right now, you can take this conversation about going and raising the debt ceiling again, and you can go and get bent. Now, before we get too much further into this, I'm going to tell you what I think is going to happen. I think McCarthy is going to hold it hostage for a little while. So, my prediction on the timeline is we're supposed to hit the debt ceiling on Thursday. We are going to supposedly default on all of our debts, every single one of them, in, I think they're saying July, so 6 months. And I do think they're going to hold it hostage for a while. But in the end, and when I say in the end, I think it's going to be, I think, and this is the thing that I see with what happened with the speakership fight, I do think they're going to attempt to make a show of it and actually hold it hostage for a short amount of time. But I'm pretty sure that that short amount of time is going to end approximately the second week of February is when I think this is going to all end. And I think that there are not going to be any concessions made on the Democrat side. McCarthy will cave to every demand that the Democrats make, but mostly because by that point, by the second week of February, he will have been plastered on the front of MSNBC every day for 3 weeks, and somebody will have made an attempt on one member of his family at least. She warned McCarthy that it is critical that Congress act in a timely manner to increase or suspend the debt limit. I respectfully urge Congress to act promptly to protect the full faith and credit of the United States. Well, I think the first thing that I would do is start rolling back those bond rates, because you can't afford that right now. A spokeswoman for McCarthy had no immediate comment on Yellen's letter. White House Press Secretary, token diversity hire, told reporters later Friday Congress is going to need to raise the debt limit without condition. Why? You and the people spending before, including the McConnells of the world, put yourself in this position last month. It is one of the basic items that Congress has to deal with, and that should be done without condition, so there's going to be no negotiations over it. Diversity hire said, this is something that must get done. Yellen's letter effectively starts a clock counting down how long the federal government can continue to make interest payments on the debt. Congress in December 2021 increased the federal debt limit to about $31.4 trillion. The limit is the total amount of money the U.S. government is allowed to legally borrow to pay for its existing obligations. Those obligations include Social Security and Medicare benefits, which I love the fact. I love the fact that those are in there. Do you know why I love the fact that those are in there? Because I keep getting told that those are already paid for. Well, you can't take my Social Security. I paid into it. It's my money. No, that's not how it works. That's just another government handout that has to be paid for somewhere. That little bit of money that you put in is just you feeling good so you can go and get outraged about it. But realistically, you didn't actually do anything. Military salaries, interest on the national debt, tax refunds, and other payments, Yellen noted. The so-called extraordinary measures available to the Treasury Secretary free up the government's borrowing capacity. This can extend the clock for weeks or months while Congress hashes out a bill to raise the borrowing limit. Senate Majority Leader Chuck U. Schumer and House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries of New York said in a joint statement, Congress must act on legislation to prevent disastrous default, meet our obligations, and protect the full faith and credit of the United States. A default, and of course this is going to be the thing because they're not going to stop their spending, and that's going to be the byline forever. Extreme MAGA Republicans, the enemies, the permanent enemies of everybody. A default forced by extreme MAGA Republicans could plunge the country into a deep recession and lead to even higher costs for Americans' working families on everything from mortgages and car loans to credit card interest rates, the leader said in their statement. Yellen wrote that the two extraordinary measures that Treasury expects to implement are redeeming existing and suspending new investments of the Civil Service Retirement and Disability Fund and the U.S. Postal Service Retiree Health Benefits Fund, and suspending reinvestment of the Government Securities Investment Fund of the Federal Employees Retirement System Thrift Savings Plan. She noted Congress previously authorized the Treasury to use such measures, which the department has employed in the past. After the debt limit impasse has ended, those funds will be made whole, Yellen wrote. Yeah, they're going to borrow money to go pay that back. They're going to borrow money from one, but then they're going to go back and pay it back with borrowed money. A senior White House official told CNBC the Biden admin plans to pursue negotiations in earnest with Congress after the mid-April tax deadline. At that point, the official said the federal government will have a better idea of how much revenue is coming in, how far it will go in paying the country's bills, and how urgently it needs to reach a deal. You know, you could get a short amount, and it's not going to be a huge amount, but if you go ahead and repeal the massive spending plan that you just passed, that'll probably, let's see, 1.9 trillion. We'll probably buy you a couple more weeks. And go ahead and repeal all those 87,000 IRS agents. Well, especially considering the fact that those are all continuing salaries. I bet you that buys you another couple months. The trajectory of the American economy between now and then will also determine how brazen Republicans become in their demands to cut spending in response. The Turtle Man, Mitch McConnell of Kentucky, the top Senate Republican, has a long record of rejecting an increase to the debt ceiling unless fiscally conservative policies are included. It remains unclear whether the new GOP majority in the House under McCarthy will unite over its own set of demands. No, it will not. And by the way, you're going to see a lot, and by a lot I mean a lot, of neoconservative Republicans jumping to the other side to overcome and get the simple majority on the debt ceiling increase in the House. A lot of people are going to betray Kevin McCarthy if he does decide to go with this. McCarthy has made little secret of the fact Republicans intend to demand massive spending cuts to the federal budget in exchange for approving an increase in the debt ceiling. But he told reporters on Thursday that GOP lawmakers don't want to put any fiscal problem through our economy, and we won't. See? They're going to cave, I promise. Steve Scalise earlier this week compared the U.S. borrowing limit to a household credit card, saying our nation needed to curb its spending the same way a person with a maxed out credit card would. At the same time you're dealing with a debt limit, you're also putting mechanisms in place so that you won't keep maxing it out, Scalise said to reporters on Capitol Hill. Because if the limit gets raised, you don't go to the store the next day and just max it out again. Actually, I know people who do. You start figuring out how to control the spending problem, and this has been going on for way too long. And we're going to confront this, he said. So, well, that's that. Let's watch a video because McCarthy is renewing calls for spending cuts as federal debt limit looms. Let's listen.
Is expected to hit its... Welcome back to Red and Blue. I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns. The U.S. is expected to hit its debt limit on Thursday, according to a warning to Congress from Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. The current national debt stands at more than $31 trillion. America's total borrowing limit is just slightly higher at $31.4 trillion. Yellen says once the limit is reached, the Treasury will start taking, quote, extraordinary measures to prevent a default. In an interview Sunday, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy said he wants to work with the Biden administration to negotiate raising the debt ceiling.
I believe we can sit down with anybody who wants to work together. I believe this president could be that person. That's the conversation I had with the president. I want to sit down with him now so there is no problem. I'm sure he knows there's places that we can change and put America on a trajectory that we save these entitlements instead of put him into bankruptcy the way they have been spending.
And CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us here in D.C. with more. Scott, good to see you. So you heard Kevin McCarthy saying he wants to negotiate with Biden, but the White House is saying we don't negotiate on the debt ceiling. So how does this move forward?
This is not the best trajectory, right? Yeah. We looked into what those extraordinary measures would be to buy us some time first. The Treasury Department says they'd stop payment to some retirement programs, the Thrift Savings Plan, which is the federal government version of a 401k, the kind of money you can withhold for now and then make up for later because that money isn't needed today. That buys time. But the thing is, and there's really no getting around this, we are 3 days out from the deadline. This is the time for the conversations to begin, and they are nowhere near starting the talks. We heard from Democrat Abigail Spanberger of Virginia, who has met the middle ground on a lot of issues in her time in Congress. Here's what she had to say about the debt ceiling and the talks so far.
Might we get to a point where the United States doesn't pay its debts? Might we get to a point where the full faith and credit of the United States government is downgraded? The fact that we're even earnestly worrying that we could reach that place creates instability, certainly here at home, but beyond that, absolutely on global economic markets.
So both sides are talking past each other. Democrats say they won't negotiate on this. Republicans say they want to sit down and talk. We're 3 days out. This is going to be very 2011-like, where we see a near breach because we're getting just weeks away now.
Yeah, I was actually just thinking about that because that was the last time that when I was covering Capitol Hill, this seems to be the same thing all over again. The difference here, though, is that we just went through this huge speaker battle for Kevin McCarthy just to get the votes to be able to become speaker. Now he has the task of guiding this conference through to agree on a debt ceiling. Is there any sense that this group that has been resistant to McCarthy is willing to budge on anything, or is this part of those negotiations?
And we'll stop that there. And yeah, I'm going to come back out and say that no, they are probably going to cave on. And again, I don't know. This is going to be an interesting test because I don't know that McCarthy is going to necessarily cave himself and come back out and vote in this. But I can probably go down the list and name a few names of people who will look at this and say, we have to do this because otherwise they'll call me racist or something or other. And I bet you well, McCarthy's only got 5 votes to lose, and I bet you there's more than 5 who'll jump on board of it. So we'll see what happens with that. From ABC, a risk of default is real if Democrats and Republicans can't compromise on debt ceiling, according to Bacon. From Tal Axelrod. Don Bacon of Nebraska warned Sunday that there's a concerning risk of a default on the federal government's debts if Democrats and Republicans are unable to compromise on raising the nation's rapidly approaching borrowing limit. I think this is a real threat that both sides have to take serious, Bacon told ABC This Week co-anchor Jonathan Karl. The Republicans were largely elected to get control of reckless funding. That's the mission that their voters have given them. So when President Biden says he's going to refuse to negotiate with the Republicans on any concessions, I don't think that's right either. Bacon said, referring to Biden's vow not to tie a debt ceiling increase to cuts to government programs like Medicare or Social Security. Okay. We don't have to start with those ones. Now, those are out of control, yes, and we are going to at some point have to have a conversation about those programs. But we don't have to start there. Seriously. Some conservatives have said they want to deal with the borrowing limit to include a decrease in spending, reviving a similar strategy used during the Obama admin. McCarthy contended last week that the government needed to change its spending, some of which he called wasteful. A lot of it is wasteful. What is? Let's do some research here. How much annual spending goes to Social Security? So according to this, and I don't know how accurate this is compared to other parts of the Social Security aspect of it, but that's only $260 billion annually. What is this one? How much does the U.S. spend Social Security? Yeah, 1.218 billion, which is 1.2 trillion. 1,218 billion, 1.2 trillion. By the way, they're not putting that much in annually either. But there again, that's not the first place that we have to look to cut. Yes, we need to have a conversation about that at some point, but that's not the first thing. There are 87,000 IRS agents that are going to go make the lives miserable of middle-class Americans. I'd start there. Congressional salaries. Hey, I bet you could extend that. I bet you if you cut congressional salaries to zero, not only would... Okay, hold on. Let's back up here. Let's go down the seawall route on this one. Congressional salaries are suspended until there's a balanced budget. There'd be a balanced budget by the end of the week. Jake Tapper presses GOP congressman on debt ceiling plan. Let's watch this one.
Let's move on to another issue because Treasury Secretary Yellen said just a few days ago that the U.S. will formally hit the debt limit next week and could default on its debt as soon as June. We've just learned that House Republicans are working on a plan to direct the Treasury Department to keep funding bare bones necessities such as interest payments and the military if Republicans in the House refuse to raise the debt limit and the country cannot pay its bills in June. You know how potentially destructive to the American economy it could be if we default or any of these measures, really. And I get you want to have spending cuts, too. But why aren't Republicans working with Senate Democrats to bring down spending to avoid this disaster instead of planning for the best way to manage the disaster?
Well, we hope that this is avoided. We hope that the Senate, Democrats and Republicans, will agree to spending cuts. Look, this has to stop. We cannot continue to operate with these types of deficits. Our national debt is one of our biggest threats to our national security. China continues to have leverage over us because of the basic financial strength of their overall economy versus ours with respect to the national debt. So Republicans were elected with a mandate from the American people in the midterm elections. We campaigned on the fact that we were going to be serious about spending cuts. So the Senate's going to have to recognize the fact that we're not going to budge until we see meaningful reform with respect to spending.
We keep learning things that Speaker McCarthy apparently agreed to during the speaker fight last week. These side deals with members of the insurgent group, the rebels. This revelation about the debt ceiling just came out. Also, we just learned from Congressman Matt Gaetz about a separate agreement to release more footage from January 6th. Do you know what else McCarthy agreed to? And why not just disclose? Why shouldn't he just disclose everything he agreed to? I mean, these are things. It's not Kevin McCarthy's house, it's the people's house, right? I mean, these things are not his to give, it's the speakership. Mm-hmm. Why not just, in the interest of being transparent?
Well, I wasn't a part of the group of 20. I don't know exactly what they were negotiating or not negotiating, but I'll say this, what the American people got to see last week was what really goes on behind closed doors in Washington and in state legislatures.
Yeah, and I know Tapper wants to come out and say, oh, there's no plan. You just want to go back and break all the toys and do all the... Well, yeah. From the Daily Wire, GOP rep hitting the debt ceiling is an opportunity to rein in spending. From John Rigolizzo. Utah Republican Chris Stewart said the fight over the debt ceiling is a critical opportunity to rein in government spending. Appearing on CBS's Face the Nation on Sunday, Stewart pointed out that government spending was the primary driver of skyrocketing inflation. Do we have video of this? No. We do have video. No, that's a different video. Alright, fuck that. No, that is the right video. We're gonna watch that. Maybe we're not gonna watch that.
Congressman Chris Stewart of Utah. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
You sit on the Intelligence Committee, which has asked for more information from the Director of National Intelligence in regard to the Biden documents. But when you were on CNN last week, you said you really doubt that there's something that could endanger national security here. Do you think this is just an overreaction to this story?
No, I don't. I mean, I do think it's unlikely that, when President Trump had this similar experience, some of the media and others claimed, oh, he has nuclear codes, nuclear secrets. I said at the time I find that extraordinarily unlikely, and I think that the same thing would be true of this situation.
Well,
probably not that type of information. But if I could make this point very quickly about the likelihood of him being unaware of this. I mean, not only am I on the Intelligence Committee, I was an Air Force pilot. I flew the B-1. I've dealt with classified documents almost my entire life, and you have.
Yeah, they're just going to do the whole interview. Yeah, we're going to skip in that, and we'll take the quotes instead. Well, we certainly want to work with Democrats, said Stewart, and we hope that they'll work with us and the president and will work with us. Look, I'm not a big fan of government shutdowns. I am. I'm a big fan right here. Yeah, this guy right here is a big fan of government shutdowns. I honestly don't know anyone who is. It doesn't help. On the other hand, I do want to make the point that it's so important. Look, the reason that we're dealing with inflation that we are, which has been generational, and it's worth remembering, that it hurts the poorest among us. There will be Republicans who will say we need to reform, we need to use this as a vehicle to try to put some limits on our spending and our debt and our deficits, he added. And I'm one of them. And there are many others who will be. So the question that you've asked now is, are those two principles, the fact that we need to reform and cut our deficits in our spending, can we reconcile that with the same time, and we don't want to harm the credit of the United States government? I do. That's our goal. The U.S. government's already lost its credit with me, so I think Republicans are aligned on that. I hope the president is as well, and hopefully we get to an agreement on that. Well, reading from the Mad Owl blog, we will see that no, that's probably not going to happen. Democrats respond to GOP calls for debt ceiling negotiations. No. I don't use MSDNC on this program that often. From Steve Bannon. Late last week, Janet Yellen sent an important letter to House Speaker McCarthy, the cabinet secretary, explaining that the U.S. would hit the debt ceiling this Thursday, January 19th, and that it was time for Congress to begin taking necessary steps to prevent the default. Stop spending money. It's worth emphasizing that hitting the debt ceiling this week does not mean the default is just a few days away. Rather, the Treasury Department will now begin a series of moves described as taking certain extraordinary measures to prevent a crisis, but those temporary measures will be exhausted by early June. Before that deadline, lawmakers will have to agree to allow the government to pay its own bills. Failure to meet the government's obligations would cause irreparable harm to the U.S. economy, the livelihoods of all Americans, and global financial stability, Yellen said. Accurately describing the reality, she added that even threatening default has caused real harms, including the only credit rating downgrade in the history of our nation in 2011. A day earlier, the new House Speaker told reporters that, as far as he's concerned, there's no need to wait until the last minute. Joe Biden, McCarthy said, should begin the process now of negotiating with GOP leaders and making them happy so as to avoid a default. Democrats are not just rejecting Republicans' demand. The party says that controls the White House and the Senate are also explicitly rejecting the very idea of negotiations. And that's the problem. Look, I understand that I am not going to get my way in this. As I've said right when we started talking about this, the most likely outcome of this is the fact that Republicans cave entirely, with a bunch of the holdouts that were criticizing, like the Dan Crenshaws of the party, going over, crossing the aisle and saying, please, make them stop talking about us on the news. That's the most likely outcome off of this. That's the long and short of it. That's the reality of it. But again, I understand the fact that, if I had my way, we'd come out with a balanced budget, or Congress would stop getting paid. Or we'd have a government shut down and just wouldn't open it back up. All the federal land would start getting sold off to private investors, many of whom would probably still make parks or get sold off to the states to make state parks out of. And we'd start shutting down departments one by one. I get that's not going to happen. But I would at least be able to go into the Congress and say, hey, can we find some middle ground here between increasing our spending cap and going further into debt and cutting spending entirely? There's got to be somewhere in between here. Something? Anybody? Bueller? In the same press briefing, Token Diversity Hire added that the process should be done without conditions. And that's the impasse that we're at. And this is, by the way, what is going to hurt more people. The Democrat inability to negotiate is going to hurt more people, and yet their mouthpieces in places like CNN and MSDNC and CBS and ABC will make this into a Republican Party. Republicans are going into this saying, okay, let's find a middle ground. And Democrats are saying, no, blow out the spending, because we can just print whatever the hell we want. From Reuters, let's skip over that one because that's a review of the other one. Hakeem Jeffries from Spectrum News 1 with video, I think. Oh, I can't watch the video because I'm not a member of New York One. That's fine. Amid debt ceiling fight, Jeffries calls for setting aside political gamesmanship. Yes, set aside political gamesmanship and do just whatever Democrats want us to do. From Spectrum News staff. As a battle over whether to raise the federal debt limit looms, House Minority Leader Rep. Hakeem Jeffries is asking Republicans in Congress, particularly those to the far right, to set aside what he calls partisan and political gamesmanship. No, he's not calling on his own caucus to do that. No, just Republicans, stop being political gamesmen. Give us whatever we want. Otherwise, Jeffries said in a New York One interview that the country will face a litany of serious consequences. In our country's history, which is about 247 years old, the U.S. has never defaulted in our debt, and if we were to do so because of extremist Republicans in the House, that will have grave consequences for Social Security and for Medicare, for the economy, and in fact, not just for the country, but for the whole world. Jeffries says, yeah. I mean, he's got a point with that because everybody trades in US dollars. If you want something in the world from another nation, you first change your currency into US dollars and then pay the other people US dollars, who will then go back and convert it back into their currency. In addition to his comments on raising the debt ceiling, Jeffries also spoke about the migrant crisis unfolding at the southern border and Santos's mounting controversies and the legacy of Martin Luther King. Yeah. We can go back and watch the full interview, except I'm not going to make a Spectrum News 1 account here, but again, he's not saying it to his own caucus. Like, hey, forget your political gamesmanship here. Let's sit down and talk. Once again, as I mentioned here, my ideal is that we have a completely balanced budget. We put big payments onto the national debt, and we cut as much spending as we can out of the federal government while keeping ourselves at least functional, even in brownout mode. But there's got to be something between that and, oh, you want something out of the government? Let's just write another check. There's something. There's somewhere in the middle here. Got one here from our friends over at NPR. The U.S. could hit its debt ceiling within days. Here's what you need to know. This is from Juliana Kim and Scott Horsley. And remember, hit that donate button because NPR needs our money, comrade, to come out and give us these communistic ideals and tell us that no matter who is in charge, the Republicans are at fault. So make sure you hit that donate button because otherwise you might actually think the Republican is in the clear on something. You wouldn't want to do that, would you? No. Republicans are always evil. And if you donate to NPR, we can tell you that. NPR is never printing reality. National Progressive Radio. Let's see what it is they have to say. Hitting the national debt ceiling is a major worry for Washington right now. On Friday, Janet Yellen warned the U.S. is on track to reach the debt limit, or the cap on how much money the federal government can borrow by Thursday. The ceiling was last raised by $2.5 trillion in December of 2021 to a total of $31.4 trillion. In the past, Congress has avoided breaching the limit by simply raising it. But House Republicans say they will not support increasing the debt ceiling this time around, not unless they get spending cuts or other concessions. Yes, irreparable harm. Yes, we know that. So 3 things to know. If the U.S. reaches its debt ceiling, the Treasury will have to take extraordinary measures. We actually know that already. The debt ceiling has been raised often, but this time may be different. Although Congress has a pattern of raising the limit, the decision to increase the federal debt ceiling is never easy. Boy, for it not being easy, they sure as hell do it a lot. McCarthy told Biden the Republicans are interested in imposing a spending cap in exchange for temporarily raising the debt ceiling. McCarthy pointed to a 2019 spending deal between his predecessor and former President Trump as a model. That agreement included bolstering spending for defense and domestic programs. Token Diversity Hire said that Biden is not interested in negotiating. It's not and should not be a political football. This is not political gamesmanship. This should be done without conditions, she said in a press briefing on Friday. Look, if that's the way that you feel about that, why even have a debt ceiling? And finally, when the U.S. hit its debt ceiling in 2011, it took months for the economy to recover. Dude, we were reeling from a lot of different things at that time. I don't think the debt ceiling had as much to do with that as you think that it does. Now, did it have an effect on the American economy? Yes. Was it as pronounced as NPR wants you to believe it is? No, it probably was not. The fact that the vast majority of jobs at the time were part-time jobs, and the only viable choices to look to for leadership in the government were Barack Obama and Mitt Romney, that probably had a negative effect on the economy too. You know, those pair where you could just turn the video off when you heard them talking and couldn't tell which one was which because they were saying the exact same things. Those two. But a little bit more coming here from KTLA5. Don't be misled about the debt limit. From David Lazarus. Yes, we know about that. Yet it's been widely reported that a House Republican plan to use the debt limit as leverage to impose drastic changes on economic policy, including possible cuts to Social Security and Medicare. That is a lie. Policy questions notwithstanding, this is a good opportunity to look at what the debt limit is and what it isn't. Specifically, what it isn't is a green light for more borrowing. And yet, as soon as it's raised, they're going to go and do more borrowing. Although some in Congress would have you believe that's the crux of the matter, it's not just the case, or it's just not the case. The debt limit involves the federal government's ability to raise sufficient funds to pay for existing obligations, that is, the spending that Congress has already approved or has allocated funds for. Which is to say, the debt limit isn't about paying our bills. Really? Look, I'm going to give you a little dose of reality. If you are using your credit card to pay your bills, you've got bigger problems. That's not what you should be, because that doesn't gain any value for you. Your credit card should not be used to, and I understand that with the move that I made just now and how tight it was, that I'm guilty of doing what I'm about to say you shouldn't be doing, at least temporarily. But no, your credit card, you shouldn't be paying your bills with your credit card. And you shouldn't be buying food with your credit card. And you shouldn't be buying gas with your credit card. Knowing full well that I've done all three of those in the past 2 months. But you shouldn't be. I had an extenuating circumstance that I'm finally finished with, by the way. Which is to say the debt limit is about paying our bills. That's something every household with a credit card balance or other outstanding payments will understand. Right. But when Spectrum calls you and says, we need our money right now, you don't just pull out the credit card and then go beg Capital One to raise your credit limit either. The debt limit is an archaic rule created in 1917 to give Congress more accountability for the nation's borrowing. Yeah, how'd that work out for you? Okay, so I thought that this was actually going to be a calming thing to try to keep people from panicking about this, but no, all this is just trying to make people panic more. I misled you. I apologize. Another one from NPR for us. Pundits are suggesting creative workarounds to avoid a debt ceiling crisis. None of these pundits are in Congress, so they can't do anything about it, but they're suggesting it. This is from Aisha Roscoe and Danielle Kurtzelben. You know what? Because this is an interview, we're going to listen to this one. We're not going to read this one. We're going to listen to this one. Or some of it.
With a raucous caucus, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy has his work cut out for him. And that's especially true with the debt ceiling. That's the country's borrowing limit for spending it has already agreed to. And it's reliably become the subject of brinkmanship by congressional Republicans. There's so much concern about a national default, given McCarthy's perceived weakness as House Speaker and how fractured his Republican caucus is, that people are floating creative workarounds. NPR correspondent Danielle Kurtzleben has been looking at these schemes, and she joins us now. Thank you for being here, Danielle.
Of course, Aisha.
So, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says the U.S. will reach the debt limit on Thursday, but they can use what she calls extraordinary measures to push off default until this summer. They can move some things around. And that may feel like a lot of breathing room, but the first of these workaround ideas we're going to talk about.
We can't do this for long. I can't stand her voice. I'm going to say that right off the bat. Maybe that's racist to me to say. Maybe it's sexist to me to say. I can't stand her voice. I can't do 5 minutes of that, 6 minutes of that.
Needs a lot of time to work, right?
Yes, right. Now, this is something called a discharge petition. Now, what this is in the House, if a bill is sitting in committee, not going anywhere, House members can sign on to a petition that would push the bill through for a vote, even if leadership hasn't scheduled that vote. Now, you need a majority of members, 218, to sign on to this. And the thinking here is that a handful of Republicans might join Democrats in doing so. But yes, this would take a lot of time because before a vote can happen, the bill has to be in committee for 30 legislative days. And that's legislative days. The House isn't in session every day or even every week. So it could be months before the bill could proceed. And even then, it would need all of those signatures plus a few more days until a vote. So, yeah, this isn't a last-minute option. It means the bill would have to be introduced well before default would potentially happen.
So I'm hearing people talk about discharge petitions, using discharge petitions for a lot more than avoiding default. But what you're describing sounds like it's very rare, and it sounds like it is procedurally complicated, so it may not be a silver bullet to congressional dysfunction.
Absolutely right. It doesn't happen very often and for very good reason.
And so there are some other ways that people have floated to get around the debt ceiling. They always talk about minting that $1 trillion coin. I don't know why they haven't done that. Or just say the debt ceiling doesn't exist. Like, you just use your mind because of the Constitution. Like, how would that work?
Right. So let's start with the first of those, the $1 trillion coin. Now, this idea has been around since the big debt ceiling fight in 2011. That's when it got popular. The idea leans on a law from the 90s that allows the Treasury to mint commemorative platinum coins of any denomination they want. Now, the intent of this law was to make commemorative coins, not to avoid a debt crisis. So that this isn't what they meant to do. But the idea here is that this law creates a loophole, allowing the government to literally print money. So to print a coin worth $1 trillion. Then what would happen is the Treasury deposits the coin at the Fed, and poof, then there's money to keep paying the bills. So that's one idea, and we'll come back to that. The other idea you mentioned was invoking the Constitution. Specifically, there is a section in the 14th Amendment that says that the validity of the public debt of the United States shall not be questioned. So the idea here is that President Biden could invoke that and the U.S. could keep paying its debt obligations. But to be abundantly clear here, these are untested ideas. They are very controversial, to say the least, but the reason they keep coming up every time we have this debt ceiling conversation is because defaulting would be extraordinarily, catastrophically bad. So these unorthodox ideas just keep coming up.
I mean, in desperate times, some people...
These unorthodox ideas. Here's an orthodox idea for you. Stop spending the damned money. Restructure. Send some things back to the private sector. Do something. And of course, they come out with these extraordinary ideas. Number one, honestly, if you invoke that section of the 14th Amendment, that would be a constitutional crisis, and the courts would get involved in that. And I don't think that they would rule in the favor of the Bidens. But the $1 trillion coin, I mean, we've already seen what happens when you just print the money. And I mean, she says it's untested waters to literally print the money. That's literally what they did. I mean, what did Tim say? Like 90% of the U.S. money supply was printed in the last 3 years or something ridiculous like that. So, yeah, there's problems here. I have 3 from The Wire and 1 from The Blaze. Videos on People. Oh no, that's all we have on the debt. Because now we have to go into the little bit of Documentsgate that we have. So, anyway, yeah, that's where the debt is right now. Again, we're not defaulting now. We've probably got until June, but, you know, I've already suggested, without touching Medicare and Social Security, different things that we can cut to hold it out for a little bit longer. We don't have to go to those two, even though, you know, if you're a Democrat and you're a pundit, all you want to do is frighten your base into thinking that that's what's going to happen. If we hit the debt ceiling, or if we default, or we have to cut spending, that's the only place we can cut spending from. No, there's a lot of places we can cut spending from before we go in anywhere near those two. All right, let's talk Documentsgate. From the Daily Wire, Ilhan Omar, investigations into Biden classified documents scandal are a political game. No, they were a political game when they started. Now it's just Republicans taking their turn. From Daily Wire News. Ilhan Omar said during an interview on a network that will never push back against her because it's paid propaganda by the Democrat Party over the weekend that investigations into President Biden's classified document scandal are nothing more than a political game. The remarks came after CBS News reported early last week that classified documents were discovered in a Biden think tank. More damaging information came out throughout the week, including subsequent classified documents found at Biden's home in Delaware. Garland announced last week that he had appointed former U.S. Attorney Robert Hur, who served during the Trump admin, to be a special counsel in the investigation after the U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, John Losh, who was assigned to do an initial review of the case, recommended to Garland that a special counsel be appointed. So we've got video. We actually can watch this one.
The news of today, 6 pages now, no additional pages of classified documents having been found at President Biden's home in Delaware.
Well, one, I'm glad that there is a special prosecutor that's been appointed to investigate.
You are glad that there is a special prosecutor. Tell me why.
Because anytime there is a deviance in regards to security protocols, that should be taken serious. It should be investigated. What I find interesting is that Republicans who have defended Trump after he literally stole classified documents, refused to turn them over, lied about having them, made up some story about how he declassified them, had to have his house raided in order for those documents to be found, are now only interested in investigating Biden, who has cooperated, who his own staff and former staff have themselves turned these documents in. So you have to understand, right? Republicans aren't really interested in upholding the law, in following security protocols. What they're interested in is playing a political game in now only wanting to investigate Biden.
Which, again, I said right at the beginning when they first started talking about this is a trap. This is absolutely a trap, and they're looking for a reason to come back out and say, oh, look, No, we are cooperating with the investigation now. Ooh, you only want to do it to Biden. Now let's go back and do this to Trump, too. And they can throw Biden under the bus and take Trump out with him. Let's grab one from the Blaze. White House press secretary ignores Peter Doocy. Then he reveals Doocy of a question he was going to ask a potential crime scene. So, we've got video, and then we've got Doocy. We've got two videos. Let's just start off with this one.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Wow, there's a Karine Jean-Pierre shaped cloud of smoke where Karine Jean-Pierre used to be. It's like, poof. It's literally like one of those old Looney Tunes cartoons. When the antagonist or protagonist runs away and there's just that cloud of smoke in the outline of the person who just ran off. That's what's hanging on the screen right now. And you apparently here, yeah, you can see him keep his hand in the air as she walks out. Runs out is more like it. Late on Friday, Doocy revealed the question he was going to ask diversity hire, and it was a doozy. Let's listen.
If I would have had an opportunity to ask a question, the first one that I have on my sheet was, why is President Biden going to Wilmington today? Isn't that a potential crime scene? We are not getting a ton of new information today about the president's knowledge of this probe, about his thoughts on the probe. Everything is being referred to either the private lawyer, Bob Bauer, or to the special counsel, Richard Sauber, the special counsel here at the White House, basically the president's government lawyer. And Karine Jean-Pierre said today that she was not involved in any of the decisions about when to go public, about how to go public with any of this. And so it seems like, and today there were more questions about other topics besides the growing document scandal. I think we can call it a scandal at this point. And so it's unclear how much more there is going to be, how much more new information we are going to get from this White House about any of this, other than they take it seriously and that they're going to cooperate. John.
That is a doozy, and I don't think that she would have had the answer for that either. Chuck U. Schumer spars with CNN host over Biden classified document scandal. For God's sake. Senate Majority Leader Chuck U. Schumer sparred with several hosts on CNN late last week when pressed about President Biden's growing classified document scandal. Schumer made the contentious remarks during an interview on CNN this morning on Friday, saying that it was too early to comment about whether Biden violated the law. Let's listen. I don't know how long this is, but as long as we're here.
Capitol Hill is Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, the Democratic senator, obviously from New York. We're so glad to have you back on set, but we have to ask you about what's happening with the Attorney General now appointing the special counsel and the fact that the White House is acknowledging, yeah, these classified documents were found.
Well, look,
do you believe that he's violated the federal law here?
It's much too early to tell. There's a special prosecutor in each situation. I think President Biden has handled this correctly. He's fully cooperated with the prosecutors. When the documents were found, he notified archives. It's a total contrast to President Trump, who stonewalled for a whole year. But the point is, we now have special prosecutors for both of these situations, very serious people. We should let it play out. We don't have to push them in any direction or try to influence them. That's all I'm going to say. Let the special prosecutors do their job.
Do you support the fact that a special counsel is overseeing this matter now?
Yes, I do. And in fact, you know, I was this when they first, the FBI went to Mar-a-Lago and they said, well, what are you going to say about this? I said, it's premature to comment. and I've said it here. So I've been consistent about it in both cases. You have prosecutors, special prosecutors. I support both of them. Let them do their job. I think that's all that should be said. The politicians shouldn't be buzzing around.
Let the special prosecutor do his job. Let him do his job. But we know for a fact that Donald Trump stole those documents. But just let the special prosecutor do his job. But Biden, and this is always the measure. The measure of whether or not it was a gaffe, an oopsie poopsie, I didn't mean to do that, and malicious intent to steal and sell our classified secrets and our state secrets to foreign adversaries and this and that, happens to be the letter after the person's name. It always has been, and it always will be. From the Daily Wire, ex-FBI leader advises DOJ to resist House inquiry into Biden document scandal. And who is this leader? Why, it's Andrew McCabe. Known partisan hack Andrew McCabe. The DOJ should resist demands by House Republicans for information about its investigation into President Biden's handling of classified documents, said a former FBI leader. It's funny, because again, whether or not this is stonewalling or you've got something to hide or anything else like that depends on the letter after your name, whether it's D or R. Hey, look, there's video of that too.
Chairman Jim Jordan announced this House Judiciary Committee investigation into the DOJ actions related to the president's handling of the classified documents today. How much does that impact the DOJ ongoing investigation?
Well, I think that DOJ will likely, I certainly would advise them if they were willing to listen to my advice, I would advise them to take a very hard line against that. There is a clear precedent here of not sharing information from an ongoing criminal investigation with Congress. And I think the DOJ is in a very strong position to resist on those grounds. Who knows what comes of that resistance? Maybe DOJ leadership starts getting subpoenaed, and ultimately that fight will end up in the courts, and that could drag things out.
Yeah, just ignore them. Don't do anything with that. Don't ignore the congressional subpoena. All right, let's talk about Los Angeles. From CBS News, LAPD faces scrutiny after death of black man who was repeatedly shocked with taser. And at the end of these little series of articles here, we'll give you the rest of the information that nobody else seems to want to give out for this one. It's funny, the mainstream media doesn't want you to know certain things about this. I wonder why. No author given. Los Angeles police are facing scrutiny following the in-custody death of a cousin of a key figure in the BLM movement. Keenan Anderson, a 31-year-old Washington school teacher who was visiting Los Angeles, died earlier this month, hours after officers repeatedly shocked him with a taser. Police said that when they arrived at the scene of a traffic accident on January 3rd, the LA neighborhood of Venice, they found Anderson running into the street and exhibiting erratic behavior. The release Wednesday of the dramatic body cam footage of the incident has sparked angry demands for greater accountability by a police force that has faced past accusations of needless brutality. And we've got some of the video on here, but not a lot of it right there. Some of this is censored out of this, but I'm going to close the rest of this out of here because the main video, which you can watch, and I didn't link it yet, but I'm going to right now. I'm going to put it in the Discord for you. Is age restricted, which means that if I play it on here, it's also going to age restrict. There, it is in general chat in the Discord if you guys want to go check that out. There are links in the description of all the major platforms. Go check that out if you're not already in there. I've not watched it yet. I didn't get home until late last night, and then I got back from work today just an hour before I had to start streaming. So I've not seen the video yet. I'm very interested. It's a 20-minute video. Yeah, let's stop that again. In the footage, Anderson is seen laying on the pavement, held down by officers, as another repeatedly shouts, "Turn over, I'm going to tase you," and "Stop it, or I'm going to tase you." A clearly agitated Anderson shouts back, "They're trying to George Floyd me," which, realistically, became the get out of jail free card for probably a lot of suspects at this point, because all they have to do is be seen on a cell phone camera or a body cam saying, "I'm being oppressed, I'm being oppressed." Whether or not they did, and we'll see again what happened before this, whether or not they were being a problem or otherwise, it's just, "I'm being oppressed. White cop, unarmed black man," even if he's heavily armed. Anderson's death, he was the third person to die in police custody in LA so far this year, sparked angry reaction. Karen Bass demanded the immediate suspension of the police officers involved pending the outcome of an investigation. And Rep. Barbara Lee of California tweeted, "I'm outraged and heartbroken for Keenan, senselessly murdered by the police." She called for systemic reform. In a video statement before the body cam footage, LAPD Captain Kelly Munoz, a spokeswoman, said investigations into the officers' use of force can often take up to a year to complete. Our understanding of the incident may change. Additional evidence is collected, analyzed, and reviewed, Munoz said. So that's what we're going into right now. Apparently there's an initial reaction. We are going to attempt to watch this and see if we can get or don't get shut down from CNN. Body cam captures police encounter with BLM co-founder's cousin before he died. If it gets too excessive, we will, by the way, be stopping it.
Get off to the side here. Get on the street. Sit with your legs crossed. Sit with your legs crossed.
They're gonna try to kill me, please.
Who's trying to kill you?
I had a stunt today.
What?
I had a stunt today, sir.
You had what?
A stunt. Like, no, that's a car.
Okay, what car were you driving?
BMW.
The BMW.
They're gonna try to put stuff in my car.
Who's trying to put stuff in your car?
They're gonna try to.
Come here.
Please don't do this, sir. Please help me, please. You know what? Help me, please. No, please help me. Help me, please. Please.
Okay, so they kept some of the bad stuff out of this, which is good, by the way, because that means that we don't get age restricted over on YouTube. And the newly released NPR is going to go with the same line. Oh, well, newly released says they just tased him. They tased him for no reason. But, and I do need to verify this for myself. Yes, and Greg Price also says literally nothing in Qasim Rashid's tweet with over 90,000 likes is accurate. But he doesn't care because it's more important to divide the country with their lies than tell the truth. Which I did see Rashim's initial tweet because he blocked me. But coming up to the beginning of here, Qasim Rashid, in a screenshotted tweet, says Keenan Anderson, a 31-year-old high school teacher and father, stopped LA police for help after an accident. They instead cuffed him, pinned him, they tased him repeatedly as he begged them to stop. Keenan died of cardiac arrest from excessive tasing, his crime, asking the police for help. Greg Price, tweeting out, he caused the accident after trying to steal a car. The cop came up to him because the other people in the accident said he did it. There's 15 minutes of body cam with police being cool with him until he resisted arrest. Police told him 9 times to stop or he'd tase them. Again, have not watched the full video. Some of it is also cut, by the way, by the LAPD. Is this going to escalate into the next BLM riots? Probably not. They can't do that while a Democrat is president. Otherwise, it might look like the Democrat doesn't have control of the country. Like they tried to make it look like, well, the Donald was the president. But there's more to the story than just the simple narrative that lawyer Rashid is trying to put back out to divide the country. All right. So we heard about the assault weapons ban. We heard about the sheriff's deputies saying that they want to enforce the assault weapons ban, and now Springfield is firing back. From News Channel 20 ABC. Illinois AG responds to sheriffs who won't enforce the gun ban. From Julia Rosier. After J.B. Pritzker signed an assault weapon ban into law last week, local sheriffs and counties have said they won't be enforcing it. Now, Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul said if they don't do their jobs, other people will. Raoul's comments came after counties from all over the state are saying that they refuse to enforce it. AG Kwame Raoul said Friday that once the governor attaches his signature, it becomes the law of the land. As law enforcement agencies, there's overlapping jurisdictions as well, so if they don't do their jobs, there are other people available to do the job, Raoul said. So basically, to boil it back down, if the sheriffs won't do that, and again, this is probably something you do need to pay attention to if you are in Illinois. If you're in one of the based counties that won't do this, they will be sending the state patrol after you. Because that's really all that they have. I'm sure if the sheriff says, no, screw you, then so is your local municipality beat cop, with the exception of a few places downstate that do have urban areas attached to them. So that state patrol is going to be going in there. What happens between you and the sheriff, I don't know. I don't know how this ends. But this is quite a dangerous game. And I don't know that the people of Springfield are going to win it. Oh, who's Earl Moore Jr.? I don't know, whoever it is. They retained attorneys Ben Crump and Bob Hilliard, the big race hustlers, so this must be another big racially charged incident. I don't even know what's going on with that. But you know what? I'm going to find out. Not on air today, but we might talk about this tomorrow. Let's grab one from Politico. The big distraction of the weekend. Now, as you'll be able to see, put these around a little bit. As you'll be able to see, this is really a nothing. In fact, the law was going exceptionally lenient for the ladies in the House, and now is bringing them up to the same standard as the men have been expected to go to forever. But then we'll also see what it is that the idiot leftoids wanted you to believe about this. From Fox News, Missouri House tightens women's dress code requiring covering of arms. From Sarah Rumpf, The Missouri's House of Representatives kicked off its new session by tightening its dress code and requiring female lawmakers to cover their arms and wear blazers, while the state's capital, much to the dismay and outrage of House Democrats. Lawmakers met on Wednesday to debate the changes to the House rules, as is customary at the start of a new General Assembly every 2 years. The existing dress code, which was last updated in 2021, states that women are required to wear a dress or skirts or slacks worn with a blazer or sweater and appropriate dress shoes or boots. Republican State Rep Ann Kelly proposed the amendment that would require women to wear jackets defined as both blazers and knit blazers, with dresses, skirts or slacks, and dress shoes or boots. Kelly stated that the update is necessary because it's essential to always maintain a formal and professional atmosphere. She was met with swift opposition from Democrats who called it ridiculous. The State House eventually approved a modified version of Kelly's proposal, which allows for cardigans as well as jackets, but still requires women's arms to be concealed. So, in the House, when you are a representative in the Missouri House, and by the way, this is in most offices around the country, not to mention going into lawmakers' offices and House chambers, the gentlemen are required to be wearing, at the very least, a shirt and tie, but in most cases are required to be wearing a jacket as well in order to be seated. And this is the case in Missouri too, by the way. The gentlemen are required to be wearing a jacket or blazer. So this is not, just they're trying to hold down the women and keep the letter of sin and temptation out of the chamber. No, this is equality of the sexes, because if the gentlemen are expected to do this, then the ladies should be expected to do so as well. You wanted the equality, you got the equality. Now, as far as I go, I don't really care that much, but I know, and this is the same thing that the Politico is saying here, this is mostly a distraction. The outrage of it. It's between the lawmakers and their people whether or not they want to keep a dress code or not. I don't live in Missouri. It's not my business, except for the distraction that they attempted to cause off of this. And that's what Politico is saying as well. Missouri Democrats say House dress code debate is a distraction. It is, but it's a distraction that people on your side are causing. From the Associated Press. Women who serve in the Missouri House will face a tougher dress code when they return to the floor this week after a debate that Democrats panned as a pointless distraction from the issues facing the state. The new rules require female legislators and staff members to wear a jacket, such as a cardigan or a blazer. The Republican lawmaker who introduced the change said it was done to ensure decorum and mirror the men's dress code. Democrats called it ridiculous, saying women shouldn't be policed for their fashion choices. Why? You police the men. Again, if a gentleman comes into the chamber without wearing a jacket, he doesn't get seated. Ann Kelly, who introduced the amendment, says it cleans up the language in the current House rules so the dress code for women will mirror the dress code for men. It is essential to always maintain a formal and professional atmosphere on the House floor and ensure this happens. I have felt compelled to offer this amendment, she said during Wednesday's floor debate. Her initial amendment said women would be required to wear business attire, specifically a jacket, which would include blazers and knit blazers. After a spirited debate, a revised amendment was adopted to clarify that a cardigan could also be worn. Once again, if this is the debate that you want your representatives to have, it's between you, the voter, and your representatives. This is not a national story, but that did stop our good old friend Jersey, my wife's son Reliant, to come back out and tell us that this is just the American Taliban all over again. Brooklyn Dad Defiant tweets out, I'm guessing the same folks who are outraged about being forced to wear a mask might be pissed that women are being forced to cover their arms by Republicans in Missouri, right? Right, which, I mean, this is a completely misleading tweet in and of itself, because, you know, he's making it out to seem like every woman in Missouri has to go back and cover her arms constantly. That's not the case. It is only when you're entering the chamber of the House, when you're in your office, when you're out on the street, when you're campaigning. It's your dress code then is between you and your constituents. The only time this applies is when you're in the House chamber in Missouri. But see, Jersey, my wife's son Reliant, doesn't tell you that, because he wants the outrage, he wants the fight. And he wants to take something that is, as I mentioned, solely between the voters of Missouri and their specific representatives, and make it into a nationwide fight. My senator, Ron Johnson, got into it with F. Chuck Todd. We're almost on the clock, but we're almost on articles too, so we might get done yet here today. Let's see how long F. Chuck Todd and Ron Johnson fight with each other. Senator calls out NBC's F. Chuck Todd for contentious interview, and he responds by insulting the lawmaker. Your partisan cable cocoon, from Chris Enlow. There's video. Ron Johnson called out NBC News anchor F. Chuck Todd on Sunday for his contentious attitude towards the Wisconsin lawmaker's suggestion that Hunter Biden may be guilty of any wrongdoing. On Meet the Depressed, Todd first asked Johnson whether he agrees with the special counsel investigation for Joe Biden. After Johnson explained why he's generally not a fan of special counsels, the conversation quickly turned to the merits of a Hunter Biden investigation. Senator, do you have a crime that you think Hunter Biden committed? Because I've yet to see anybody explain. It's not a crime to make money off your last name, Todd told Johnson. It's not, but it is a crime to sell influence to the vice presidency. When Johnson did name potential crimes, Todd quickly shifted the conversation to Jared Kushner, implicitly accusing Johnson of being one-sided. He also accused Johnson of targeting Hunter Biden. At that point, Johnson had had enough. Let's watch.
And joining me now is Republican Senator Ron Johnson.
Oh, they're not going to cue it.
Subcommittee on Investigations.
You know, did our investigation, then issued a report. If there's evidence of wrongdoing, then we should refer that to the Justice Department. Then the investigation should take place. What happens nowadays is the investigation begins.
End up either on purpose or inadvertently interfere in the investigation?
The more important imperative here is for the public to understand exactly what is happening inside.
With that decision, what you're saying is, if the Justice Department decides a crime wasn't committed, they're not going
to. They went to Twitter, solicited briefings from the FBI, and to a far greater extent, anything that Russia or China ever. About $30,000.
That's why you do investigation.
I mean, Chuck, is it a crime to be soliciting and purchasing prostitution in potentially European sex trafficking?
To make money off your last name.
Anything that Russia or China ever could have hoped to accomplish. These are facts. And that's all I'm interested in. I'm interested in the truth. And I think the American public deserves the truth. And again, these investigations, they cover up the truth.
Senator, do you have a crime that you think Hunter Biden committed? Because I've yet to see anybody explain it is not a crime to make money off your last name.
So, Chuck, you ought to read the Marco Polo report. Where they detail all kinds of potential crimes. You know, Senator Grass and I certainly
let me just stop you there. Potential. Potential is innuendo.
About $30,000.
That's why you do investigation.
I mean, Chuck, is it a crime to be soliciting and purchasing prostitution in potentially European sex trafficking operations? Is that a crime? Because Chuck Grass and I laid out about $30,000 paid by Hunter Biden to those types of individuals over December 2018, 2019, about $30,000. This is about the same time that President Biden offered to pay about $100,000 of Hunter Biden's bills. I mean, again, that's just some information. I don't know exactly.
Here's what I don't get. All right, Senator.
It doesn't really look on the. It sounds sleazy, as you know.
I'll take you at your word that you're ethically bothered by Hunter Biden. I'm curious, though. You seem to have a pattern.
Are you not?
I seem to have a pattern. I'm a journalist. I have to deal in facts.
Are you not?
I deal in facts. It says, Senator, my question to you is, I'm always worried. I have skepticism of both parties. I sit here with skepticism of a lot of people's work. And I'm curious, were you at all concerned? Your Senate Democrats want to investigate Jared Kushner's loan from the Qatari government when he was working in the government negotiating many things in the Middle East. Are you not concerned about that? And I say that because it seems to me if you're concerned about what Hunter Biden did, you should be equally outraged about what Jared Kushner did.
I'm concerned about getting the truth. I don't target individuals.
You don't? You're targeting Hunter Biden multiple times on this show, Senator. You're targeting an individual.
Chuck, Chuck, part of the problem, and this is pretty obvious to anybody watching this, is you don't invite me on to interview me. You invite me on to argue with me. I'm just trying to lay out the facts that certainly Senator Grassley and I uncovered. They were suppressed. They were censored. They interfered in the 2020 election. Conservatives understand that. Unfortunately, liberals in the media don't. And that's part of the things that part of the reasons our politics are inflamed is we do not have an unbiased media. We don't. It's unfortunate. I'm all for a free press. It needs to be more unbiased.
Senator,
there's misinformation on both sides, but the censorship and suppression
we're trying to do issues here in
from the left.
Partisan cable. Look, you can go back on your partisan cable cocoon and talk about media bias all you want. I understand it's part of your identity. Let me move to what happened in Brazil. And I want to play something that former Vice President Mike Pence said about what happened in Brazil.
So, two things with that. Number one, that was incredibly unprofessional. That is not something that should have left Chuck Todd's mouth. And those at NBC need to really think about moving him out from something else because, of course, NBC and then Chuck Todd's regular gig, MSDNC, are both partisan cable cocoons. But also, Ron Johnson sucks at this. There's a reason I didn't vote for him. There is a good reason I didn't vote for him. Ron Johnson blows at this. And yes, Ron Johnson is extremely partisan, and going after Hunter Biden is what gets him the most attention in Congress right now. It's what gets him the most power. As I've always said, he blows wherever the power is. He has no standing. He has absolutely no background, backbone. We don't know what he actually stands for. All we know is that he goes wherever the power is. Let's grab one from Fox. Throw some music back up here too, shall we? From Fox News, Sheila Jackson Lee introduces bill criminalizing some forms of hate speech. From Houston Keene. Texas Democrat Sheila Jackson Lee introduced a bill to combat white supremacy by criminalizing certain forms of hate speech. After the ill-fated attempt by the Biden admin to monitor American speech online, Jackson Lee introduced the Leading Against White Supremacy Act of 2023 to assign criminal punishment for certain forms of hate speech. You knew this was coming. 1984 all over again. The bill's language is broad and could result in people facing criminal charges for sharing hateful content, including on social media. And of course, the question always is who decides what the hateful content is? Okay, I'm going to give you an example of this, actually. Now that I'm actually reading some of this, I want to give you an example of why the who decides. Let's go back here. Find my tweet, because I posted this. Alright, here we go. So when I always say who decides what is and isn't hate speech, we have to go down to this comment. Now, this is my innocuous tweet because, again, my first thought is slash the spending. Get rid of the spending. Turn some of that down. There's some middle ground between blow out the budget and spend every dollar that you can get your hands on and dead, stop the spending, don't spend another dime, suspend congressional salaries, suspend hiring, freeze and start firing federal workers, and stop completely all federal spending. And yes, I am on this arm. That is what I would rather have, is absolutely no more government spending ever for anything. But there's a middle ground between these two things that we can find. There are thousands of options that we have between here and here. So that's my thing. Can't we just slash some spending? All the way down here in the read other replies is Johnny Mnemonic saying, because I said let's slash spending, or you could just say you hate minorities. According to Johnny Mnemonic, aside from his tweet being insanely racist in and of itself, but according to Johnny Mnemonic, me saying let's slash spending is hate speech. I could get put in jail for that if Sheila Jackson Lee's law went through. For saying, why do we have to spend so much? The question is never whether or not, what the speech is, it's who decides whether or not it's hate speech. Let's keep reading. Under Jackson Lee's bill, a person engages in white supremacy-inspired hate crime when white supremacy ideology has motivated the planning, development, preparation, or perpetration of actions that constituted a crime or were undertaken in furtherance of activity that, if effectuated, would have constituted a crime. The bill would impose criminal penalties for anyone who published material advancing white supremacy, white supremacist ideology, antagonism based on replacement theory, or hate speech that vilifies or is otherwise directed against any non-white person or group. And such published material, if it was read, heard, or viewed by a person who engaged in the planning, development, or preparation, or perpetration of a white supremacy-inspired hate crime. Jackson Lee's official office did not immediately respond to Fox News Digital's request for comment. Yeah, that's where we're at right now. Alright, and with that, it is now 7:59, so it's time to wrap it up. We'll save these last two. Actually, we'll skip the Daily Wire one because that's Sheila Jackson Lee. So we'll save this one about the post office for tomorrow. Go drop that over there so we can do that. And instead, we'll finish out the show, as we always do, with the rules of acquisition. That is right, I am a hyper-capitalist, which means I share many of the views with the aliens of Roddenberry's creation who are supposed to be the main antagonists of Next Generation, the Ferengi, the hyper-capitalistic bug-eating race from Ferenginar, who got ahead and got warp drive not by developing it, but by buying it, just like they got everything else into there. And that is extremely based, by the way. So we go through the Ferengi religion, highlights 435 rules for how to interact with other Ferengi, how to interact with other species of the galaxy, and how to conduct commerce in general. A religion to which, if you follow these rules, you are allowed to go to the divine treasury after you pass away and bargain for your next life. We read one of these rules every day, see if they are applicable to human society, which a lot of them are. Many of them are not, but see if they are applicable. And if they are, we explore why they're applicable, how to use them, and how to translate them out of capitalistic parody and into real world. So I'm actually going to skip the 122nd rule of acquisition because it is identical to the 112th rule of acquisition. Never have sex with the boss's sister, never sleep with the boss's sister. both from playing God. And I'm wondering, by the way, if somewhere somebody did a typo in the script that brought this, because they both come from the same episode. And we will move directly on to the 123rd rule of acquisition. Even a blind man can recognize the glow of latinum. Look, sometimes you spend hours, days, months, years developing an active business plan. I spent several months incepting what I wanted Turn Some Pages Productions to be, before I even made a phone call to a web developer and said, hey, how much is it going to cost me to do this? $2,000, by the way. I spent months trying to figure out exactly what I wanted it to be, how I wanted to entice writers in, how I wanted to do commercials, and yes, belly aching over whether or not some of my friends can be on there because I can't sell commercials on some of their programs. That is a hurdle that I'm still trying to work around because I do like my friends and I want to be able to help them succeed, while I work up some money to get the web development done. But on the same class, I mean, it's going to take me at least a year before I've come to a point where I can start setting up and deciding whether or not I can distill, because that's what I want to do. You know, to take me into retirement. I'm never going to stop working. You guys know that. And I think that's going to help me maybe even get into an early retirement where I can work from home and either operate a factory or let somebody else operate the factory, but still make my own stuff at home. Private batch, if you will. But I have a lot of thought to go into there, and it's probably going to take me a year to figure that out. Sometimes you can plan forever to find a way to make profit and keep profit going. Or sometimes you just fall into a great idea, you recognize it by sheer dumb luck, and you become wealthy by doing so. And that's where the 123rd rule of acquisition comes in. It's stated many times through DS9 that you have to have the lobes for business. You have to have instinct and intelligence and recognition to make profit. Or sometimes you just fall into it. Even a blind man can recognize the glow of latinum. Even a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. Is another way that you could put this off of this. So don't count your competition out, because sometimes they'll just get absolutely lucky and blow you away. And with that, we're out of here. We're done. Good tune. All right, that was fun. Let's head out of here for the day. Where's the outro music? There's the outro music. So, thank you everybody who came by and chatted in the live chat. We had a lot of fun with this. This was quite a bit of fun, definitely for sure. And even going with the rules of acquisition. We got some serious stuff done. We're probably going to be talking more about the debt ceiling tomorrow. We're probably even going to be talking about Document Gate tomorrow as well. Plus, I got a host of other things set up for tomorrow. I've even got all my things I like and things I hate ready for Thursday. So stay tuned, stick around. We'll see you back here, 6 p.m. Central Time, every weekday for more news, more headlines, and more contemporary. I'm going to go figure out why it is. My dad texted me while I was on air and said I blacked out earlier on in the show because my monitors all showed green. So, and by the way, if I did black out, let me know. But with that, we're out of here. If you are on the Twitch side, stick around. We'll go find somebody to raid over there, but I'm probably not going to be sticking around with you guys for that because, of course, it is Monday, which means we'll be joining the Game Boys and seeing what our friend Midget B is doing in Majora's Mask right now. So come back and join me for that as well, whichever platform you choose to be on. I do encourage you to go onto the Porch Boys one because they're awesome people. But we will see you here next time for more news, more headlines, and more contemporary. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing you then. And until then, I'm Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Take care.